Hands-on Tech with Owais. In this tutorial, we'll walk through the installation and configuration of secondary DNS server on Windows Server 2022, set up DNS failover, and verify that the secondary server takes over when the primary DNS server is down. So let's get started. But before we begin, what we need is that the primary DNS server is installed. Domain controller. So yeah, we have DNS installed, and static IP addresses must be assigned to domain controller in the domain member. Now let's move on to the first step, that is installing DNS role on secondary server, which is ACIDM01 machine. We're gonna log in with administrator credential and then open Server Manager. We're gonna click on manage, or we can click on add roles and features, and then we're gonna choose role based. Click next. We're gonna select the ACIDM01 and we're gonna click next. Click on the DNS server that we want to install. Click next and next, and install. And let's wait for it to get complete. Then we can close the window, no problem. Now that we have, and it's still on the, okay, now we have that. Now that we have installed the secondary DNS server, so we're gonna go ahead and configure it. I'm gonna click on DNS, open DNS Manager here, and we're gonna connect to DNS server by right clicking on DNS and click on connect to DNS server and choose the following computer. Here we are going to enter the IP address of the domain controller, which is 192.168.0.1. click OK. Excuse me. And click here. Now the connection to the primary server is now established. We're gonna right click on forward lookup zones, click on new zone, click next, and then we're gonna select the secondary zone, click next, and we need to provide the zone name. Before we proceed, let's make sure that the in the domain controller the DNS is configured well, because if we allow the zone transfer from here, let's click on it, oops, and go to properties, go to zone transfer. See, this is unchecked. We must make sure this is checked, allow zone transfer, or else the secondary DNS server will not replicate the primary DNS server. So this is something which I missed. Now come back to the secondary DNS server, open DNS Manager, forward lookup zone, new zone, secondary zone, again click on browse, double click on this primary DNS server IP, and we have a forward lookup zone from the primary DNS server, double click on it, and we have this domain here what we want to duplicate, select it. Now we need to add the IP address of domain controller in which the primary DNS server is installed, which is this one. Okay, 8.0.1, click enter, and here we go. It has been validated. Click finish. Now to complete the setup, right click on ACPI lab and click on select transfer from master. The records will now sync from the primary server. Okay, it takes some time. As I refreshed it, as you can see, it has replicated the hosts from the domain controller. Let me show you. Go to DNS, expand the forward lookup zone, expand HCIP lab, You see the host, which is now same here. Now that we have allowed the zone transfer from domain controller to domain member secondary server, now we can enable the failover configuration on our domain member machine, our secondary server. So now let's go to the domain controller and open the DNS manager. Now that we have allowed the zone transfer, so we can now configure the DNS failover by right clicking. First, let's create a new host here, and we're gonna write www, and we're gonna assign it the IP address, suppose 10, and we're gonna add the host. Now the host has been added successfully. Now we also have to do one more thing, is going to forward lookup zones. Right click on it. Sorry, go to ACID domain control, right click on it, click on properties, go to advanced tab and enable the round robin and enable net mask ordering. Apply, click OK. The failover setup is now complete, so let's test it. Go to the Win 11 machine. Now our client machine is up and running, so we're gonna go to the network adapters, go to cmd and cpa.cpl to configure our primary DNS server. And here you will use this preferred DNS server as 192.168.0.1 as the primary DNS server, and the alternate DNS server 192.168.0.2. If it's not configured, you must configure it. Click OK, OK, click OK on the CMD and run the nslookup. We can do both. We can either enter into it and look for the domain name ACIP lab. Now the domain name is resolved is concerning IP address that we have created a host, or you can do the other thing around, for example nslookup and www.aciplab.com. So the DNS, the domain name is resolved to is concerning IP address. Now let's stop the primary DNS server by going to cmd net stop DNS. You can even go to the services from the server manager. Now the DNS server is stopping and it's stopped. Now let's head back to the client machine, clear this. Now let's see whether our DNS failover is working or not. So we're gonna first check whether our DNS server is configured on client machine or not. We're gonna ipconfig/o, and yes, we have DNS server, the primary DNS server and the secondary DNS server. Now we're gonna ping to the secondary DNS server whether our whether the client machine is connected to the domain member or not, the secondary server. Yeah, we're good. We are getting reply. Now we're gonna nslookup, enter the domain name that we want the IP for, and we're gonna enter the IP address of the secondary DNS server because it's gonna fetch the name resolution from the domain member since our domain primary DNS server is down. There you go, it has fetched. If you try to fetch it from the primary DNS server of which the IP address is this one, it will not, the DNS will not be reachable. enter. Okay. And then see the results. There you go. So our primary DNS server is down, but our secondary DNS server is up. So let's enter the IP address of the DNS server, secondary DNS server, and there you go. It successfully resolves. So this is how we verify, and that's it. We have successfully set up a secondary DNS server and configured DNS failover on Windows Server 2022. Now, if your primary DNS server ever goes down, your network will still be operational. I hope this tutorial was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you have any questions. See you in the next video.